Hello. I don't yet know all the people that I'm speaking to, or haven't met you all in personalities. But I think you've used the real people, which in my mind often gets changed to real people. Yeah, really looking forward to making more of a connection with all of you. So far it's really Hans that I've made a connection with. And he asked me to share maybe a little bit about what I might be able to contribute. And he also asked for a kind of bio to show the multiple disciplines where I may be able to offer experience, as well as just being a human, a connected human. Yes, so I partner with an eco-builder from Russia. The reason I partnered with him is because I'm interested in a lot of the highest quality, most functional, most eco-friendly building designs. How we can make them low-tech, accessible, very cheap, rapid and very quick to build. Because I've been a member of eco-building communities, not on site, for a couple of years I was in one eco-community, but what I mean more as a consultant, visiting lots of eco-buildings, mostly families and individuals, but also groups of eco-buildings, more in places where planning permission is not such an issue for larger builds, but some co-housing in the UK. And what I see is that even many of the top experts who are architects, and having worked as a project manager and a site manager in construction, a lot of the best eco-building kind of companies, where they start from in terms of eco-design is not actually what's possible. And I don't mean what's possible in terms of dreaming of what's possible. I mean what's possible in terms of the very base principles of what we understand as practically possible in terms of being eco-friendly and in terms of how buildings function. So just how energy saving a building can be. And what I find is that building projects end up, because of the design process, often falling into the lowest common denominator of compromise. And so what we've done is pioneer a building system which takes into account and is specifically for communities that want to establish themselves. So I'm willing to speak to individuals, and I am speaking to a few individuals who want to build their own eco-home. But I only give kind of remote advice for that. Whereas for communities, we have a system which allows, not a system, basically inventions and ways of doing things that we've discovered, where a family can have 2-3 bedroom home for around £15,000. But how, and when I say £15,000, that's in the first year a fully functioning home, with a clean, good environment inside. And then upwards from there depends on personal preferences of fittings, things like baths, kitchens, how far an individual or people want to go, and can be built and fully functional within the space of about 2 months. Again, depending on things like delivery of products, if there are any, if someone's choosing particular kinds of finishes. And there's advantages to this in that technically the buildings are temporary, but they function just as well as any earthship. And what it allows is the establishment of a community extremely rapidly without a lot of the presence of big machinery or disruption to the local community, which tends to alert the attention of potential resistors to a project. So we've been refining that and refining that and refining that, and we've made some amazing breakthroughs just in terms of simplicity. Like often the answer that we're seeking is staring us right in the face. And we use particular design practices to uncover those answers which are in plain sight. They're based on thousands of years of wisdom from many different disciplines. So that's what I have to offer, and I am interested in working with. It's a bonus for me that it's a newly establishing community, because I have spent years visiting places like monasteries, temples, community projects, feeding the homeless, things like that, where I see the way that, in particular the kitchen and the sort of communal areas, but in general, the way that when communities move into pre-existing buildings, I have a great awareness of how that environment determines the social, the flow, the social interaction and cohesion of that community. And it is my perspective that it has a huge effect, particularly where an environment limits the ease with which individuals can take time for themselves and connect to community when they want to. So it's very much a bonus for me that your community is starting from the beginning. But I do want to make clear that I'm only willing to work with communities that want to take a polycentric approach. Polycentric means, and this has to do with power and the establishment of community and the development of group mind, group projects, group thought forms, which is the other area that I'm really interested in, and I'm part of a group of people who we call ourselves ecosystemic facilitators. So we're interested in working with whole complex systems and challenging ourselves to go into very difficult situations, very challenging situations, and learn and have an influence on a system, not through an objective view of this is what I understand and I'm some sort of expert or observer or human projecting out onto others, othering and separating, and therefore trying to influence in that separatist way. But by entering into an environment, which is what I'm doing now. Right now I'm making a connection with Rill, and that connection started with Hans. And we are in a complex system. We're in what we're in. And as I connect with you, I become part of whatever is going on, seen and unseen, within a system. And our intention is to not come with the aim of influencing, but recognize that we influence by who we are. And that the greatest influence is in changing oneself while in connection with a being of any kind. Whatever holon level you want to view a being at. And the reason for that boundary, in essence, of who I'll work with is because of an observation of how power moves in the establishment of community. And, it's a common narrative that establishing community and working out the challenges of community is hard, it's difficult. I would question that. I recognize the experiences from which that comes. And so a polycentric approach means a few things practically. It means that I assume a certain level of freedom for each individual family or individual in having complete and open choice about how the manifestation of their home occurs, and value that manifestation being unique and according to the frames of reference of the person inhabiting that space. Now, obviously things get more complex if a community or a space is one that many people move through. And obviously there's a lot of churn when a community starts, because power essentially moves amongst those who've invested the most time, the most responsibility, taken up the most responsibility, and also expressed their own personal power the most. So polycentric speaks to a lot more than just the choice of what happens inside a building. What are the other factors? I think that's enough for now. I'll just briefly give the parts of my bio that I think are more relevant or can give you an idea of where some of this is coming from. So I grew up in a home with a father who's spent his whole life working with permaculture and indigenous communities, mostly around Africa, but around the world. And always had a garden at home, always went out and picked and then ate, picked, cooked and ate, picked and just ate. And always, I don't actually like the word always, for many years existed in an environment where discussions about ecology, the oneness of things, design, community, permaculture was alive, and I consider that my primary education that's relevant here. And then I was a consultant traveling around with community projects in mostly around Southern Africa, in my early 20s, mid-20s. Doing things like mostly observing, actually, at that time, which was really great. It was great that I was in that position. And performing technical design work, such as presentations to the International Permaculture Conference on behalf of organizations which wanted that kind of technical support. And then became interested in eco-building, mostly as a hobby, and started to go deeper and deeper into that, and then was employed, practical experience as a site manager, getting quite a lot of hands-on practical experience as well in standard house building, and really building up enough of the contrast of seeing how terrible the current systems are and what the benefits are to a certain amount of efficiency. And then project management of larger kind of refurbishment projects, where I gained enough experience with ventilation systems, heating systems, and I suppose the balancing act of working at that scale. And so that's how I've come about to this interest of seeing the ways in which larger scale organizations, projects, and the more bureaucratic ones work on this basis of the protection against risk, and how that filters down into results. And then seeing some very low-tech projects where things go wrong, but also where the costs, the efficiency, the eco-friendliness at base level in terms of using local materials, etc., is at its highest. And so for a good 11 years I've had filtering in my mind how to fuse and synthesize the best from both worlds. So that's where I'm coming from within this particular realm of eco-building around the question of how a community can establish rapidly in a way which blends into the landscape extremely quickly, enabling them to focus on the building of community aspects without all of the challenges that come along with long-term construction on site. And more flexibility to actually live in a space and then adapt it towards the ultimate end of a dream home. I'll just briefly mention some other aspects that may be of interest. So in the future, so this is kind of fractaling out. My academic studies were all to do with longevity. I don't actually like the word longevity because it implies somehow an importance in terms of living a long time, which I don't care about the length of life on its own. But the communities where longevity is present are amazing examples, mostly, almost all of them, the highest kind of longevity places called the blue zones, are examples of traditional and indigenous communities which have weathered the changes of modernity in a way where the individuals existing there have both a realistic and positive outlook on life and have created health for themselves and health in their social systems, which is in contrast to a lot of the communities which are struggling with the trauma of the breakdown of colonization and the fact that our generations are essentially mixed. We can't go back. And obviously there's a lot of practical application in terms of real world living youthfully. And then yes, I am not speaking just as myself. I am speaking as an individual deeply embedded within a group called Samara Trust, which is a small group of ecosystemic facilitators who are inquiring and asking themselves, how can I be most well, understanding that wellness comes from challenge, essentially, but the right challenge at the right time in the right way. How can I create the greatest wellness in myself in service of the greatest good for all humanity? And obviously that statement is more directed, but it's really the greatest, the highest goodness of not just humanity, but all of life on this planet, and then further. And I would name our competencies or skills as the kind of deep work that holds individuals and groups in a way which is deeply transformative, and most importantly recognizes that each individual has their own frequency, and that each of us is the resolution of all of the challenges that we see around us inherently, and comes from a way that recognizes that. And we partner with an organization called the Institute for Applied Multidimensionality. And they do at times provide funding for communities, but it isn't the standard venture capital negotiated kind of funding. It's more of one which is deeply connected. So there is the possibility of that connection through me and through Samara Trust. I really hope that provides useful context. And all that talking and use of the mind, I hope it also gives you a sense of the directedness of my heart, and some material that can help you to sense into what may be of value to Rill, in alignment with my wellness, your wellness, the highest service of all humanity, through what you are doing, what you are being and becoming, which is very beautiful from what I've sensed.